Do you think that the three streams model as currently presented of Catholic, evangelical, charismatic as kind of the de facto model in the province, is that a proposal for a theological center? Like, do you think there is a theological center hit in that proposal, or do you think that's just kind of like more relativism, like let's agree to disagree, and these three camps just coexist? How do you assess that in terms of this conversation about centering?
I think the three streams. I mean, without absolutizing them, right? It's not like you have,
Sure.
in the way that you'd have like a Roman Catholic parish that's headed by Dominicans or Franciscans, right? It's not formally cut off from one another. But I think it's descriptively correct. It's what you find when you go to an ACNA parish. You're going to find one of those three emphases usually. So, you know, whether that's normatively the way to go is a different question. I think it's descriptively right.
Yeah.
Is it relativism when it comes to Anglican identity and Anglican distinctives? I'd say no. Um, there are precedents for all three of those sub traditions within the broader classic Anglican tradition. Be with the possible exception of the charismatic tradition. The charismatic strand is, a product of largely product of the late 19th and 20th centuries. But even then, there's an argument to be made. I mean, in the Anglican tradition, you see this in William Forbes, you see it in Richard Fields. They're not principled cessationists in the way that you get like with the Reformed, right? So there's at least, and even in the Book of Common Prayer, say in the rite for visitation of the sick, there's sort of an opening, or rather an openness to the miraculous. But we're not Pentecostals. We're not trying to make it happen, right? But there is this openness to the supernatural and the charismatic that I think might not naturally lead to, but does create the space for the charismatic branch. So, and then of course with the classic Anglican emphasis on patristics, seems to connect with the Tractarian movement and Anglo-Catholicism, right? They're the Tractarians, the Anglo-Catholics just kind of emphasize different aspects of the patristic tradition than did say Ussher and Davenant and Parker. And then with the evangelicals, Cranmer's religion of the heart is sort of the source for that. That emphasis of Cranmer's never fully dies out. It sort of comes out in full force in evangelicalism. So all of them have their origins in the classic tradition. So it's not merely relative. It's not like we're just doing this. No, they're harkening back to something that's there and just kind of putting it up front is what's going on, and relegating other things to the background, which can be problematic in some ways. But
so it is in some ways arbitrary. It is in some ways a center, like the current theological center. I mean, because in some ways it does push other views out in the periphery.
Yeah, it does.
I think that's interesting.
It becomes a bad thing when it's trying to push out things that also and at the same time belong to the classic tradition.
I think that this is kind of like a realization for me right now. I think that's kind of where I hadn't realized, like, the old high church tradition or the central churchmanship position is on the periphery in this framing, and it's a product of kind of what's being centralized. So I think that's interesting.